Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. It is time to work on the bog mixed forest once again. This mixed forest is a mixture of larch trees and black spruce trees, and I'm taking every opportunity I can to miniaturize these trees to get them a nice tight conical shape. In the last video, I was pruning the trees, trying to get them a tighter conical shape, bringing the branches in tighter to the trunk line. And now you can see on the spruce trees, there's all kinds of new buds coming out. Now I can use all these buds to further tighten up the branch structure on the tree. You can see there's buds coming right off the trunk there, so I can eliminate longer branches in that area. Trying to get my apex tighter. You can also see that the buds in the upper part of the tree, the apex, are big, fat buds. The ones down lower are much smaller. I'll show you those. Here's a look at the lower buds on the same tree. They're very, very small. I would say they're about an eighth the size of the buds at the apex. They're much, much smaller. So you can see that they're weaker, and as you go up the tree, the strength goes to the apex. When these bigger, larger buds in the apex begin to open up, I'll be pinching those back, and the lower ones, the weaker buds, I'll just be allowing to grow, trying to balance the vigor on the tree. If you don't balance the vigor, these upper branches will get really, really strong, and your lower branches will just wither away and die off. I've always encouraged people to study the source material, study trees in nature. Nature is the inspiration for bonsai, and then bonsai is your interpretation of nature. So it becomes a personal piece of art. Today we're going to go out into the bog, a real bog, and study trees and the plant life in a bog to inspire us to further develop this bog planting. In the last video of this mixed bog type forest, I created some deer trails going through the bush, and today we're going to see some real life examples of that. We'll also see some real black spruce and larch in a bog type setting. It's time to get the rubber boots on and head out and see a real life bog. So here we go. I have arrived here in the bog, so let's have a look around and see some of the details that make up a bog forest. Throughout the bog, you'll notice there's patches of ice and water all throughout the bog, so you really have to watch your step and wear tall rubber boots. Here's a group of black spruce. You can see how fine and delicate the foliage is. Really nice trees. One of the cool features of a bog forest is all the beautiful understory plants, mosses, lichens, ferns, all kinds of really cool plants. Here's a couple of black spruce, and you can see how rough and old looking the bark is. I'll show you a close-up of that. All the living part of the tree is up in the top where it gets light, and as you go down the tree, the branches are dead. But the branches go right down to the ground, which is a cool feature if you're making kind of a natural forest planting. So here's the bark close-up. You can see the really cool texture on it. Yeah, just beautiful trees. In a previous video on my bog forest, I said I wanted the forest to look uninviting. So here's an example of that. You can see that, there's no real way to walk into this forest. All the dead branches go right down to the ground. There's no pathways. It's just uninviting. And that's kind of a cool look. Trees in a bog forest have a very shallow root system. The only place the roots can get oxygen is near the surface, kind of growing out among the moss, and so they never really get any deep roots that anchor the tree in the ground. So when a big windstorm comes, a lot of the trees will tip over. This is a good example of a flat root base, the kind you want in bonsai. I'm surrounded by black spruce, and you can see how tight the foliage is to the trunk. Another feature of the bogs is this dark black soil. So when you get water, standing water like this, it just looks black and dark. It's pretty cool. On the forest floor, you can find some really interesting plants. Really beautiful. This part of the forest floor is covered in plants that look like little spruce trees, but they're not. Really cool. You can see they have kind of flowers on the tips here. There's all kinds of wonderful native white pines in the forest. Just amazing. Here's a look at the forest floor. It's just littered with larch cones. Here's a look at some of the beautiful moss covering the forest floor. It's just amazing. It's amazing to see so much snow in April. Look at that. Most areas of the forest aren't very inviting to walk through. They're very thick. Here's a stand of larches beside me. You can see they're tall and skinny and maintain that tight conical form too. Sphagnum moss is used a lot in bonsai. Here's what it looks like growing in nature. Just kind of fluffy moss that grows on the ground and kind of builds up on itself, creating quite a layer. Yeah, so that's sphagnum moss growing in nature. Here's an example of a deer trail. It goes into the woods and divides into two, and it comes across, and you can see it disappearing over here. So there's the deer trail. Again, it comes into here, divides into two. The one path goes off here, and the other path goes off this direction. So in the summer, this would all be green with foliage. And there's some other sphagnum moss here. I'll show you this stuff. Sometimes it turns red, and you can kind of see it here. I believe that's sphagnum. There's a whole bunch of different mosses mixed in here. Yeah, it turns quite a nice red color. You can see that. Really beautiful. Here is a really cool section of the bog. Lots of standing water, trees that have tipped over, all kinds of mosses on the forest floor. Amazing. Here's an example of a perfectly flat root system on the bottom. So the roots just don't grow into the standing water. You can see it tipped up from here. So they just grow along the surface, along the moss. That way they get oxygen and they're not waterlogged. So yeah, you can just see how flat that is. There's two trees and they both tipped over. Here's a really nice deer trail here. It's nice and green. Just beautiful in here. Black spruce all around me. This is what inspires me to do that bog forest planting. Just scenes like this, they're just so beautiful. Here's another really nice deer trail. It goes through the forest here. You can see how green it is and all kinds of lush moss. There's a deer footprint down there. Yeah, so these trails go all through the forest. Most of it, very difficult to get through, but if you follow a deer trail, you can get into the forest quite deep. I noticed here in the bog forest, the trees don't get very tall. You can see if they do start growing tall, they grow above the canopy of the forest and the wind catches them and blows them over. So most of the trees in the forest here are kind of, I would say, small to medium height. It's absolutely amazing out here. The only sound is the wind and nature. I really enjoyed this hike into the bush, into the bog forest, but I've got to get back home and prune up my bonsai bog forest, so I'll see you back at the greenhouse. I'm back from that wonderful walk through the bog forest. I find it very inspiring to walk through the woods and you see all kinds of cool ideas that you can apply to your miniature bonsai forest. So this forest is a miniature interpretation of the walk that I did today. I have my sections of the forest where no one's invited, where you couldn't really walk through there, it's too dense. I have my deer trails, I have my spruce trees, and I have my larch, and a few dead trees too. I'm going to start today by pruning up the larch. So here's a branch here that you can see there's a whole bunch of clusters of needles at the tip. And then right back at the base of that branch are a couple of clusters of needles. So I could technically remove the outer tip of this branch and then develop it closer to the trunk from here. So I'll show you that. So I'll come in, prune that back. And now I've got more compact growth that's closer to the trunk, keeping my overall silhouette of the larch in a very tight conical shape. There's another one coming out the front here I can remove, like that. There's one coming up here, I can cut that back, like that. There's a branch out to the side here. I could take that back. There's one out the back I can remove. Like that. I can reduce this one back. So you can see how tight I'm getting this conical form now. Here's an overall look at that larch now, so you can see I've got this conical shape very, very tight. It's looking quite nice. I'll prune up all the other larch trees in the forest, getting them to that really tight conical shape, then we'll come back and have a look at it. I've got all the larch trees in the forest pruned up. They're nice and compact. I noticed this one on the end here, the shoots are starting to extend and get quite long. So I could pinch the tips of those just to keep them compact. Otherwise they'll become a big kind of bushy looking tree. There's two ways of approaching these elongating larch tips. You can just pluck out the center with your fingers. So I'll do that for this shoot. So you just grab the center shoot, grab the base, and you just pull, and it pulls out a tuft of larch like that. I'm going to eat this just to try it out. Tastes quite nice. Or the other method is you can go in with your scissors and you can just kind of go between the needles and prune out the tip like that. If you pluck them, generally you get less browning on the needles, but both methods work quite well. Sometimes in forests like this, it's hard to get in. Like there's a shoot here. It'd be hard to get my fingers in there, so I just come in with the scissors and prune it out. I didn't take a whole lot off the larch trees, just some of the branches that were a little long and I could prune them back to a shoot closer to the trunk. Next, I'm going to go to the back of the planting and start pruning up the spruce. I'll turn the forest around so we get a better view of the spruce back here and a little easier to work on. Like that. So I just want to get them a tighter conical shape if I can. This spruce here is a good example. You can see I have one branch here and there's no buds at the tip, but back here I've got some quite large buds developing. So I can prune that branch right back just in front of those buds. There's another one here. I pruned the branch off here and I've got buds developing way back here, so I can prune the tip off that branch, leaving a little for dieback. Same with the one above it. I've got buds right in by the trunk here, so I can prune the tip off like that. There's one coming forward here. This one has a bud underneath the branch, so I can prune that one back. There's one coming forward here. There's a bud back coming off the trunk there, so I can prune that back. This one, there's a strong bud here. I can prune that one back. The one back here, there's a bud, so I can prune it back also. So you can see I'm getting this apex tighter. Now, there's a lot of branch structure up in this apex. I need to thin it down. Otherwise, this will get vigorous, just like the larches, and you'll get thickening up in the apex. So I've got to remove some of these branches and just keep a few. So there's a vertical one here I can take out. This one here, can't do much. I can take this stump off that's coming up the middle here, like that. Move that. There's a large branch out the side I can remove here. Now, I've got, from the front view, this would be the apex, so I can take some of these away. It's just getting too dense up here. So I'll take this one away. I'll remove this back one. And I'll remove this side one. That simplifies the apex, takes a bit of vigor out, and there's lots of buds in here to develop. And when these buds start elongating into shoots, I'll probably do some more thinning in this area. Down below here, I have a branch coming out. It divides into two here. I can take the middle shoot out, shortening that branch. On this branch, I have a bud coming out the back here. I can shorten that one. This one, I have two buds closer. I can shorten this one. This one, there's a couple of buds back here. I can shorten it. This one can be shortened. So you can see how conical, a very tight conical shape I'm getting this spruce, which is kind of exciting. This one, I'm going to take one. There's three growing from one spot. I'll remove one of the shoots. That one there. And again, as you go down the tree, the vigor gets less. The buds are smaller. You can't do as hard a pruning as you can do up in the apex. So basically the bottom of the tree, I can't do much. I'll just have to leave that alone. Here's the apex of the spruce beside the tree I just pruned. So again, there's too much happening up here. So I've got to prune it back. Prune back this vertical shoot. This one can be pruned back. There's lots of buds down here. This branch can be removed. This branch can be removed. There's a ton of buds coming off the trunk there. Now this branch, I'm going to remove it because I don't want, right now I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4 branches in the apex, and it's just too many. So I'm taking out the most vigorous ones. So this one, and I think I'll take this one out. So these ones are kind of low branches. keeping this strong one. I think I could take this one back a bit more. There's a bud down lower. I think I'll keep it like that. Yeah, so that's a good reduction in the apex there of that tree. I'll work away, pruning up the rest of the spruce in the forest, getting them nice and compact, then we'll come back and have a look at it. So not all the branches you can reduce right back. You've just got to look for buds. Be patient. Buds will form eventually. Especially if you're feeding the tree well, watering it well, they'll gain vigor and they'll just try and bud out everywhere. I finished pruning up the spruce in the forest. I'm quite happy with them. They're getting very compact, some more than others. It depends on the vigor of the tree. All these spruce were just planted last spring, so they've only been in this pot a year, and some are more vigorous than others. So it'll take a while for some of the trees to kind of catch up in vigor. You can see the new larch I planted here isn't as vigorous as some of the ones from last spring. But overall, I'm very happy with this spruce. I think they're getting a nice kind of conical shape. Very reminiscent of my walk today. Yeah, it's quite nice. So the last thing I want to work on is the moss. It's getting quite thick. I'm losing some of my deer trails in here. And that moss that I left to climb up the trunk of the tree is maybe getting a little out of hand. It's starting to climb way up. So I've got to do a little moss pruning. I'll use my curved scissors and I'll just reestablish my deer trails through here. Pruning them back just wide enough to get a deer through. These taller plants here, that's a ground cover I planted just to provide a bit of variety on the forest floor. That's starting to open that deer trail back up. That's looking much better. The trail's now open. Deer can romp through here. I did see a deer last time I was out in that bog forest. Michael and I from the KW Club went for a 5-hour walk through there. And it was fantastic. I'll just clear up some of the moss around the base of the trees now. And then I've got to do this clump over on the dead trees. For this moss, I'll come in with the tweezers and just kind of pull some of it away, just so it's not quite so thick. And maybe a little pruning too. I don't have to take it off the trunk, just prune it back kind of a bit shorter. There. That still looks wild, but it's a little more tamed. Looks a little more miniature. One element that I'm missing in the forest is a tree that's fallen over. And I would really like to have one in there. I was thinking I would like a tree that's fallen over but is still alive. So maybe a large tree that's tipped over on an angle or something, maybe resting against another tree, and it's still growing. So all the shoots kind of grow vertical off the trunk. I think that would look really nice and really natural. I do have a small larch that I could add to the forest. I will show you that. Here's a look at the larch here. Just a little larch. So that would look pretty good in the forest, I think. I think I'm going to leave this element until next spring. I'll prune up this larch to get it a nice tight conical form in the meantime. And then next spring I can try it out in some different places in the landscape and see what looks best. My work on the bog forest is finished for today. Let's fly in and have a look at it. Sure reminds me of walking in the bog forest today. Looking up at the trees. The deer trails. Yeah, they're really cool. So beginning year 2 on this forest, very exciting. I hope it continues to develop nicely into the far future. Here's a look at the total amount of greenery I pruned off the forest today, including a bit of moss in there. The next step for this forest will be to pinch the growing tips as they're elongating, pinching them back to keep them nice and compact. That'll be coming later on. That's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.